We're delighted to have you here, Anuja. You definitely win the prize for the sharpest suit on the show.
Thank you. I'll take the compliment.
Now, let's get started with this. One of your brands, one of your key brands is Mama Earth. I mean, that sounds very trustworthy, Mama Earth. Is that just before we get into things? Talk to us about something as simple as what's in a name.
I think a lot's in a name. That's really the first sort of introduction to a person's identity. When it's a brand, I think, it opens the window for people to really know, to sort of understand the brand. Mama Earth had a very interesting short history of, about the last 7 years that it's come into existence. It was a brand that started out as a baby care, baby category brand. Largely built on the promise of honesty and natural ingredients and, toxin-free, chemical-free, safe products. And therefore, I think the name does justice to what the brand's promise was, which is Mama and Earth. So Mama Earth.
Yeah, and it's a great statement, isn't it, to start off with a brand so big and bold. But you're 7 years in, right, Anuja? So here, when we talked to Virat and Deepak about this trust takes time. How do you see trust in the context of a 7-year-old brand?
I think, Jasper, for a new and emerging brand, what's really different versus a legacy brand, and I've had the opportunity to work on a lot of legacy brands as well, is that you're building trust and not necessarily inheriting it. And I think, when you are in the business of kind of building a new brand, you literally have to almost have the paranoia to do the right things every day, because you're building that culture, both in the organization and outside, of getting people to trust your brand. And therefore, everything that you're doing, and that's true for every other brand, right? But everything that a brand does is either building or eroding trust, bit by bit.
Well, and it's interesting, actually, isn't it? Because the CMOs of these kind of older stage brands will, of course, argue that time is on their side, right? But time's not always your friend, right? And there's plenty of challenger brands that are taking advantage of the fact that people have fallen out of trust with old brands.
Yes. So, we're a house of brands that particularly caters to the millennials. And one of the things that we know about millennials is that, they're not looking to just trust you without getting into, details of what you're putting into the product, right? What is your promise? Are you living your promise every day? And I think that brings me to the point on transparency as well. Transparency possibly always precedes, trust building. And it's very important that, right from your promise to what you're kind of declaring on your packaging, to what you're kind of talking on social media or in your communication is very consistent, very transparent, and very open. And if the consumer has questions, you're open to answer those. And the millennials are, and I think the Gen Z now, they're a very different bunch from, I think, the kind of audiences or target groups that we were used to about a decade back. They're extremely questioning. They would get into details. They would do their own research before they build that trust. So they wouldn't take anything on face value. Yeah,
and that's been a big shift, right? Yes. Particularly in India, in the sense that perhaps when we were growing up, we would implicitly trust certain names. Not the case necessarily now.
And I think that's really paving the way for challenger brands. You've got a plethora of D2C and, digital-first brands that are emerging today. But I think, the yardstick of trust is not necessarily going down. It's possibly only going up because the clutter is a lot more. There are multiple media. There are omni-channels that the consumer has the option to choose from. And that actually makes the decision process tougher. And I think which is where the consumers need to do a lot of their homework. And I think which is where the brands need to aid the consumer with all the information that's relevant, all the information that will help them to make the decision. But I think equally all the information that will help the consumers to trust your brand.
Okay, and that's sort of, to a certain extent, Anuja, seen through the lens of marketing. But here's a question. Where does trust sit in the organisation? Does someone in the organisation own trust? Is it syndicated? Talk to us about that.
Just again, coming out of an experience of a very young brand, I feel it's, like I said, it's every action, that's either building or eroding trust. From an organizational lens, it's literally a personal value that eventually translates into the organization value. So every leader, every employee, every partner needs to demonstrate, fulfilling the promise and commitment that they're making. And I think it's important, I use the word paranoia and I'll go back to it, but it's very important that, you're extremely conscious of the promises that you're making as an employee or as, as a marketer or any function for that matter, to whoever is your stakeholder and ensuring that you are keeping to it. And, that eventually, day by day, is what's translating into the culture.
Well, let me push back a bit on that, Anuja, because we hear all the time on this show that everything communicates the brand, it's every little action of the employees and the rest of it. Yeah. But we all of us, including myself, that have organisations with lots of people, know that it's desperately imperfect, right? Yeah. People come in certain moods. So the propaganda, if you like, is that everything communicates it, but it's hard, right?
Oh,
this is hard.
It's hard. It's not something that'll be, that you can wish away. It's not something that's going to be built in a day or a month or a year. I think it's going to take years together. I think it's a very conscious attempt. For a lot of legacy brands, I think there is this almost unsaid or even said code, right, of what they stand for. I think the newer brands have a harder job of actually going out, and setting examples day to day in how they speak, how they kind of put out the promise. And it's definitely not easy. And I don't think, it's fair to even assume that there can be a shortcut to it. It's tough because you're dealing with people eventually, right? I mean, all of us are in the business of working with people, talking to consumers who are people eventually. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely not an easy one, but I think as a leader, it's upon you to first demonstrate those values, day in and day out, breathe those values, because people can see through, right? If you're somebody who's pretending.
People know, right? Yeah. People know. Well, let me, again, put you on the spot a bit. I have 16-year-old twin daughters, so I'm thinking I'm not your core TG for Mama Earth, but my kids kind of are. Why should they trust Mama Earth? Why should they trust your house of brands, in a word?
I think one is the access of information to the promises that we're making. Today it's a brand that's out there. It's a digital-first brand. It's a brand that's making claims for which it's also providing open access to information for the consumer to kind of read through, to question. It's a brand that's interactive, because when you're a digital-first brand, there is a lot more interactivity with the consumer. And I think, once you kind of buy into the brand, that's just the first, I think, point of interaction. The litmus test really is eventually the product, right? When you actually apply the product on your skin, do you still feel as good about your decision to buy into the brand? And I feel we've been a brand that's kind of made up to the commitment, and we've been very, very honest, very vulnerable, and very open to consumer suggestions and feedback. And I think that's what's helped us to build trust with our consumers so far.
Yeah, and God knows you've enjoyed tremendous success, right? Listed results day, I think, today?
Well, yes.
Fingers crossed. Final question, Anuja. So, I mean, you've got many innings ahead of you, but, you've been with Pepsi, you've been with Lay's, you've been with Godrej. Yeah. When you think back to the young Anuja marketeer, what, in terms of trust, what do you wish you'd known then that you know now?
I think one lesson that we could possibly pass on to all the younger marketers is, I think it's okay sometimes to make mistakes, but it's very important that you own up to it. I think both, again, as a human and as a marketer, brands, consumers, and people are forgiving, provided you're owning up to the mistake and you have the commitment, to kind of change the mistake or kind of alter the results. And I think, I'm just kind of going back to the opening line that you made, right? That you're not really upset that someone lied, but you're upset about having lost trust. And I think as humans, we are possibly more forgiving when somebody kind of approaches us with a mistake. So I think as marketers, right, it's important to not be defensive. I think it's important to say that, we could err, and you should just sort of, go out to the consumers and say that, look, we possibly did make a mistake, and we'd love to, make amends to it.
Well, Anuja, I think you've landed us in a fantastic place in the sense that trust is not abstract, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of, you're trusted as much in adversity as you are in anything else. Anuja, you've just been a fantastic guest. Good luck today, and we look forward to seeing you back on Trailblazers. Thank you.
Thank you so much.